Thank you very, very much, everyone who's joined us so far. My name's Sarah Bruce White, and I'm MedCity's event manager. MedCity are the life sciences cluster organisation for London and manage the Advanced Therapies Network, which is an initiative of London Advanced Therapies. Very shortly, I will explain some brief logistics and introduce you to Francesca Gliubich, the Director of London Advanced Therapies, who will be moderating this event. If I could ask all participants, apart from speakers, to keep themselves muted and videos off to preserve the bandwidth of the event, and also let everybody know that we will be recording this event to share with registered attendees that maybe couldn't join us. There will also be a very active Q&A and debate during the last 30 minutes of the event, and we'd really like to hear from as many of you as possible. So if you could type questions into the chat function, and we will address those questions at the end. So do feel free, though, to type them as we go through the event. That's certainly enough from me. If I can please hand you over now to Francesca Gliubich, Director of London Advanced Therapies.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this first event of 2021. As you know, the London Advanced Therapies is an initiative that brings together the academic community working in London, working in the field of cell and gene therapies. And the ATN events are one of our initiatives and really aim of bringing together everyone who's interested in discussing different topics. This evening, we will focus on the issue of talent. We think that and we may be wrong, so we'll discuss today whether it's true, the impression that many of us has, that there is a shortage of talent at all levels, from scientists to healthcare delivery professionals. And the question we are going to explore are what kind of professional profiles will be needed, and are we doing the right things to train them and to train enough professionals. I will introduce the first speaker, Grisenbach, Professor of Molecular Medicine at Imperial College. Uta has always had a strong interest in training professionals in the field of cell and gene therapies, and so her contribution will be really interesting in saying what is it that we are doing, but what is it most importantly that we should be doing in the future to train and to attract people to this field, because we also have the feeling that many young students, for instance, don't know that this is a very interesting field for them to get into. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Uta.
Thank you very much, Francesca, for the kind introduction. So as Francesca said, I'm based at Imperial College and have about 30 years experience in research and development of advanced therapeutics, and hold various roles relevant to this. But I think I've been invited today as the chair of the Pan-UK Advanced Therapeutics Education Workforce Group, to give you a bit of a just 5-minute overview about the sort of landscape that we're working in at the moment. Next slide, please. You've all seen this slide, and you know that we have 9 licensed advanced therapeutic products and medicines approved in the UK. I won't go into details because most of you will be familiar with these. But next slide, please. What I would like to show on this slide is that the UK PLC in advanced therapeutics is really world leading. 12% of UK, I don't know what it says, sorry, 12% of clinical trials are conducted in the UK. So we are at the moment world leading, and you can see that over the last 10 years, employment has significantly increased in this sector, from 500 people in 2012 to more than 3,000 people today. Companies developing advanced therapeutics has significantly increased. Importantly, the investment into UK companies has increased from about 35 million to 2.5 billion. And this just gives you a feeling about the growth in this sector at the moment. Manufacturing space has increased, and importantly, the number of clinical trials conducted in the UK has increased from 20 to roughly 180 over the last 10 years, and is projected to increase significantly further over the next decade. So I think we are currently world leading, but the question is, what do we need to stay world leading? And then importantly, do we have what we need? Next slide, please. So I guess, what do we need to stay world leading? We need investment into infrastructure. We need a strong industry base and a flowing academic pipeline. We need patients and clinical trial infrastructure, and we need a supportive regulatory environment. And for each of these points, I can probably give you a lengthy lecture. But what this session today is about is to talk about, the skilled workforce that we need. Next slide, please. Do we have what we need with respect to skilled workforce? You will hear later on about the Advanced Therapies apprenticeship community and the Advanced Therapies Skills Training Network, which are really exciting initiatives. Next slide, please. What we also need is skilled workforce in the NHS, and these are the nurses, clinicians, pharmacists, and other healthcare professionals that we need to not only conduct clinical trials, but also to deliver licensed medicines into the NHS and into patients. And here we have formed a pan-UK working group for advanced therapeutic workforce development, which is an initiative and a very close collaboration, I should say, between London Advanced Therapies, so Imperial College, King's College, and UCL, and the 3 advanced therapeutic treatment centers, as well as the cell and gene therapy catapult. And this initiative has done over the last 12 to 18 months a lot of work in the space of education and workforce training. Next slide, please. The summary of our education portfolio is listed here. We are developing training videos. We run expert-led webinars, which are very successful. We are developing e-learning modules for allied healthcare professionals, covering a range of topics related to advanced therapies. We're developing competency assessments, which will be rolled out to UK participating hospitals and institutions. Exemplar protocols, policies, and risk assessment, which are suitable for local adoption to local requirements. We are preparing resources for face-to-face teaching, if and when we are allowed to teach again face-to-face, and develop formal courses related to advanced therapeutics. So here, for example, at Imperial College, we have a master's in genes, drugs, and stem cells, which has been running for 5 years. Manchester has more recently established a master's in advanced therapeutics, and we'll hear later that King's College also has plans to set up a master's in advanced therapeutics. So it's a lot happening in this space. Next slide, please. So research in advanced therapeutics really spreads across the UK, and this means we need education across the UK. And what we need is a coordinated approach to workforce education and training, because there is a lot of work to do. And I think we have to avoid duplication in this space and link up all stakeholders involved in developing education material. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me or Ian Hollingsworth, who is the program manager, education manager at the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult. And I think with this I stop, and it's my pleasure to introduce Penny Morton. Penny is program manager for advanced therapeutics at the MRC, and importantly, she is MRC lead for the new LifeArc MRC Innovation Hubs for the Gene Therapy Network. And I'm sure as part of her presentation, she'll tell us more about this exciting innovation hubs. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Uta. So thank you for the introduction. And as Uta says, actually initially I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what MRC does in general to support advanced therapies and skills and training, but then introduce to you the innovation hubs for gene therapies. So if we could have the next slide, please, Sarah. So I really want to reassure you that advanced therapies and skills and training remain very much core to what MRC does and are laid out as one of our strategic priorities in our MRC delivery plan, which was published in 2019. Next slide, please, Sarah. I know this slide is really busy, but I just wanted to show you how we support advanced therapies throughout our portfolio. So we support a lot of advanced therapies through our discovery science portfolio, which provides that pipeline of new ideas. We have dedicated translational support schemes, such as the Developmental Pathway Funding Scheme, a Confidence in Concept, and the new Experimental Medicine panel, all of which support advanced therapies within them. But also through large-scale infrastructure, such as the Nucleic Acids Therapy Accelerator, which was launched just over a year ago now, and the slightly newer innovation hubs for gene therapies, which are a joint strategic initiative between UKRI and LifeArc. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a couple of slides. Could I have the next slide, please, Sarah? So MRC, we don't have any specific schemes for training and skills in advanced therapies, but we do support training and skills and advanced therapies throughout all of our training and skills programs, starting from training and skills development at that early career stage through our doctoral training partnerships and clinical research training fellowships. Next, please, Sarah. Through to that transition to independence through our clinical and non-clinical fellowships, like the clinician scientist fellowships and the career development, but also through new investigator researcher grants. And then next, please, Sarah. And then finally to that transition to leadership, which is a sort of more senior fellowships. Next, please, Sarah. And the next one. But also just to mention the clinical academic research partnerships, or CARPs, which allow time for clinician academics, time away from their clinical duties to be able to perform research. And we support advanced therapies through every single one of these schemes. Next slide, please. So I'd really like to focus now on the innovation hubs for gene therapies. These are a new initiative jointly funded by MRC and LifeArc, and with additional support from BBSRC. And these are really dedicated to trying to address the bottleneck in translation of this amazing academic base that we have in gene therapies through into the clinic. And this bottleneck was identified by several people as getting access to a clinical grade viral vector for early phase clinical trials. So this is what the innovation hubs are going to do. They're going to provide GMP grade viral vector for academics, but also provide translational support for academics in preparing for clinical trial readiness. Next, please, Sarah. And in doing so, they are going to be an integral part, we hope, of the UK ATMP manufacturing landscape, and as such are going to have to really work hard to help to address the workforce challenges in this area. Next slide, please. So specifically, the network has laid out some of these activities, as well as others that they would like to do to be able to help to address the sort of shortfall in the skilled workforce in ATMP manufacturing specifically, by linking with the advanced therapy apprenticeship schemes and by hosting hopefully lots of advanced therapy apprenticeships, by providing training placements for MSc students, and also creation of new MSc biomanufacturing focus modules, by providing novel training materials, but not duplicating and really linking with all of the really amazing existing infrastructure, for example, like the national training centres that have been recently announced by Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, and also linking closely with the NHR Advanced Therapies Group, which are also doing really fantastic work in their sort of education and skills space. But the network will also, as well as providing training in manufacturing within the hubs, and for anybody who wants to come to the hubs to learn about manufacturing skills, will also be focused on providing training for academics in their labs to make sure that they are developing their processes and preparing ready for clinical studies. Importantly, the network really needs to work closely with industry, and I think this is really essential. We will be providing placements for industry professionals and secondments from the network into industry to be able to share best practices in manufacturing. And we also have an industry advisory group that will be supporting the network through the coordinating committee, that will really, we hope, will be able to allow the network to work very closely with industry. Next slide, please, Sarah. So in the future, we're thinking very closely about how we further support advanced therapies and skills. And both advanced therapies and skills are integral to our spending review plans. We will continue to proactively support emerging science and technologies, including advanced therapies. We acknowledge that there is a need to have flexible support in order to be able to drive that innovation and to align with the broader landscape. And we really hope to work very closely with our other UKRI partners, the Catapult Network, London Advanced Therapies, DHSE, charities, businesses and investors to be able to provide a sort of joined up solution for advanced therapies in the UK. A couple of examples of things that we are very actively thinking about is sort of specific postdoctoral support in advanced therapies, and this would be in collaboration with industry. This is something that we're sort of thinking about and working at the moment, but also how we build on our existing infrastructure. So not just the Innovation Hubs network, but also NATA and all of our centres and units to really support skills in advanced therapies. And in general, we are actively scoping for areas of need and opportunity, but how we can support life sciences training and skills in the UK. So please do come and talk to us. Hopefully we'll be sending around my email address at the end of this. So please do come and talk to me or ask questions now, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you. So next, I would really like to introduce Kate Barlow, who is the Director of Research Platform Transition and Commercial Development at King's College London.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Penny, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you all today. So I'm going to give you a bit of a real world experience of developing the cell and gene therapy team at King's. Next slide, please, Sarah. So the team is an established GMP facility which has been in operation for almost 20 years now, and it very much originated through an academic endeavour led by Professor Farzan Farzaneh. And the reason I'd like to talk to you about the group today is to give you a real world example of how things have developed over that 20 years and what that has meant from the perspective of developing the team. The team now produce the largest number of viral vectors for clinical trials use in Europe. So they move from being purely a research and academic facility into manufacturing and producing cell and gene therapies. And the team has grown significantly, particularly over the last 5 years. There's been significant growth, and there's now over 30 people in the team. And to give you an idea of how the team is structured, you'll see they're kind of structured across 4 areas. So research and development, production, quality, and operations. And you'll also notice that there's almost identical numbers of staff across R&D, production, and quality, and then sort of just a few people across operations. The group plan to continue the expansion, and our current plans see us doubling from where we are now to probably nearer 60 people over the next 5 years. And that's as a result of us expanding our manufacturing capability in clean rooms, with one set of clean rooms just about to be qualified and go into use, and then another set to be refurbished. And that means that we will have significant expanded capacity. So obviously there's all sorts of implications around this quite aggressive expansion and growth and what that means from a team perspective. Next slide, please, Sarah. So I just wanted to share with you some insight and learning really over the period that I've been working with the group and particularly developing the team. Some of the challenges that we've had, succession planning and actively growing talent has been quite a difficult area. I think that, that perhaps the need to proactively grow and develop deputies, for example, and not just expect that the existing talent will just grow and step up when needed. Retention of staff has been and continues to be a challenge. To train staff, particularly in GMP facilities, so good manufacturing practices, it means that it takes us up to 12 months from a member of staff joining to that member of staff actually being trained and able to kind of actively participate in the manufacturing process. So that means that staff retention is something that we really need to focus on where possible. Competitive salary levels has been an issue as well, and has been cited by many of our staff as the reason for leaving, along with workload. And I think some of it around workload has been precipitated by COVID, and manufacturing activities in a COVID environment with restricted numbers is quite difficult in and of itself. But I also think there's not necessarily been a lot of planning around workloads, and that kind of split between those that actually do activities and actually those that have some capacity to plan activities. Progression within the team has also been a challenge. So I think historically, certainly in this team, there's quite a flat structure. So there wasn't really the opportunities for career progression, and there wasn't clarity for the team about where they would go next. So that's something that we've been looking at. And leadership development, so not just focusing on the kind of technical requirements of the roles, but thinking about development outside of the scientific and technical skills that people need. So developing leaders, developing the management team, providing opportunities for coaching and organisational development. So where that's led us to in terms of the things that we're working on and the ideas for the future. So thinking about flexible reward schemes, which can sometimes be a challenge within an academic environment. We're not really set up to reward, certainly financially, through bonuses, etc. So thinking about how we can reward our staff has been something that we've been looking into. And likewise, incentives and motivation, it doesn't always have to be financial, but I think we do need to think about how do we continue to incentivize the workforce and make sure that our career progression is clear and that they're motivated to stay. But we know that people will move on. It's natural and it's good. And I think that we should be encouraging movement between industry and academia. I think it's in everyone's interests. And we'll end up with a really rich, varied workforce with a set of real varied experience if we allow and potentially kind of proactively support the movement between industry and academia. And that could be through placements, it could be through secondments, but also I think closer linked to our NHS partners. My background is very much within the NHS, and one thing that has struck me is that we could give our teams working within advanced therapies, particularly the manufacturing teams, a bit more exposure actually to the clinical kind of end users, if you like, of what they're manufacturing. So that could be through observerships, it could be through clinical forums, talking to the clinicians and the people who actually deliver the therapies, but it could also be talking to patients themselves. And then I think thinking about the culture and team effectiveness as well has been an area of focus. So how do we start to break down some of the silos that have inevitably kind of evolved over time between the very different groups within this team to improving communication and actually thinking about common purpose of the team. And then finally, ongoing training is obviously an area that we're working on with the team. And that's not just kind of in the scientific arena or necessarily directly related to advanced therapies, but also thinking about some of the wider operational and management experience that the team members may benefit from. So for example, people have started to go on Prince 2 project management courses in order to better support what they do in their working life. So that's just a few insights from me. The development of the master's programme is obviously key to our ongoing training of our advanced therapies team. So on that note, I will hand over to Professor Francesca Gliubich, who is Vice Dean and Head of Regenerative Medicine at King's College London, to tell you a bit more about that programme.
Thank you very much, Kate, and MedCity for giving us the opportunity to present a bit our project, which is, I think, a bit of a pioneer activity that starts a few years ago. So I have been working in the field of cell therapy for the last 25 years at least. And I have actually witnessed during these years the progressive complexity of delivering advanced therapies. And, in particular, I think a cell therapist today requires by far more complex skills than when I started. 25 years ago, it's probably sufficient to know very well the science underpinning the therapy, but now things have become, by far more complex. So there is a need to equip the new therapists, irrespective of which environment they're going to work, with a lot more knowledge that used to be. And this is also because there is no area in isolation. Every single activity must be fully linked to a set of knowledge, which is very, very important. So since when I moved, which was 6 years ago, from Imperial to King's, one of the really, interesting possibility that I want to offer was the development of this 360 approach to training. And this translates into this master, which we called cell therapies, cell therapy from bench to market, with the idea of exploring and equipping the student with all the different areas which are required in this field. So this is not simply providing all the elements which underpin the science, which relate to the science underpinning advanced therapies. This is clearly very important, but is not clearly sufficient. This is only the very beginning. So what we have been doing is also to provide a number of information to familiarize with the very complex landscape of manufacturing cells. That means understanding all the regulatory pathways, which can be, well, usually are a massive hurdle to deliver the product to the bedside. That is not, however, sufficient, because that also includes considering the ethics. We know very much how, sourcing stem cells or other type of approach can be a big hurdle. We also have a module to provide another important view, which is how to design and analyze clinical trials. I think all of us are very familiar with the long number of failures relate to the fact that clinical trials actually fail. And that is because they're designed very badly. And that is because very often we use cells as if they were the usual, traditional drugs, chemical drugs. So there is a need to reconfigure our approach. The other aspect, which is entirely new also, and forms a big part of our master, is the development or understanding the business plans associated with cellular therapies. If I have the next slide, please. So we have a module entirely focused on how to commercialize cell therapies. This is clearly important when we have to deal with investors, and whether we want or not to develop a very small idea, the scientific idea, into a product that will go into the market and, of course, into patients. Understanding business models is critical. I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with a completely paradigm change now in the context of cell therapy. We are all aware of the high cost, for example, of CAR T cells, but at the same time, the pharma have moved from a continuous treatment to one shot that can potentially resolve the disease completely. So for the first time, we talk about cure rather than just sort of maintenance or control of the disease. So this has provoked a completely different perspective to approach our business plans in doing this. So we are in this module, we also look at how to appeal to investors, how to include in this in the business plan the manufacturing aspect. This is also a critical step to do that. The route to market, because that is also something that the investors want to know exactly. Deal with structures and of course the patents issues. And importantly, we have engaged in several interactions with the industry, whereby during the module, critical players from the pharma or biotechs are coming to share their experience. So this is clearly we think a very different approach to train the new generation of cell therapists. If I have the next slide and last. So we have now launched to a different, hopefully, increased perspective, which we have now partnered with UPenn, another huge player in advanced therapies. They start the CAR T cells there, and we have now done a summer school in advanced therapies, that first of which will run in June. I'm afraid that it's completely fully booked, and by which we are going to target PhD students to confer this extra skills about, or knowledge at least, about advanced therapies. So that's where I finish. I'm very happy to be contacted if you want to know anything more about these education initiatives. And I'm honored to pass the witness to Matthew Cobb, who is Deputy Clinical Manager at Miltenyi. And it fits very well with his concept about career evolution.
Thank you very much, Francesca. So yes, as mentioned, I'm going to be giving a very brief summary of the sort of career evolution that I have been through ever since my journey from university into industry. And that really spans around about 12 years involvement in this. So could I have the next slide, please? So if we're sort of thinking where I began really from the university level and the particular course which I chose, there's lots of different things and modules which were included as part of it. And really this is like sort of, a sort of snapshot of the directions I could have gone in biomedical scientist to go straight into NHS and some of the developments there. Pharmacy, which is very close to the degree choice that I chose. But pharmaceutical sciences was the main level of interest I had, looking at the treatment of drugs and looking at what was at the time and looking at what I could get involved in and getting those into patients. So looking at the bottom corner, you've got the 4 pillars of healthcare, pharmaceuticals, which is obviously where I started. And my career was a little bit interesting because I started in 2008 at the time of the financial crisis. So obviously that's a little bit difficult. But it presented an opportunity at the time to completely switch from pharmaceutical scientist to move into an immunology field. And this has really set me off on my journey towards cell therapy. And along the way, working at companies such as Innova, who became Expedon and then finally Abcam. And this was more in a sort of production method of moving more into biologics such as antibodies and the conjugation strategies for those. And then finally moved back to more on scientific hands-on with Lonza, with applied protein services. And really this was sort of my sort of journey through the pillars, away from pharmaceuticals more towards biologics. And finally, my sort of main entry into cell medica as cell therapy was in 2013, and this was one of the first companies really involved in commercializing and bringing a cell therapy to the field for the first time in what we currently know. So after that, this was just in London, so obviously very expensive to live and desires of owning a house, so that was never really going to happen back then. London was quite expensive. So then I moved back to Lonza with Applied Protein Services. Again, Lonza being a very fantastic company to work for and well structured. And then finally moving on from Lonza, ending up where I am at Miltenyi Biotec today. But there was no real clear pathway for me with any of these particular ventures. And you know, throughout this procedure, it's a case of thinking, well, where do I want to go in my career, and some of the opportunities which have opened up. And cell therapy never really existed as a concept to me back at the beginning of 2004, or even at the end of 2008. And really, it was sort of my entry via Cell Medica that introduced me to this. So could I have the next slide, please? So Miltenyi Biotec is where I'm currently at, and I'm pleased to comment that I've just been promoted to Deputy Clinical Manager as well. So obviously it's a nice move through various pathways, and really it's sort of as part of the companies that you work for is some of the training things that they put you through, and some of the courses which are available. So I could never imagine being many years ago an expert on some of the systems, which obviously is part of the training regimes I've had at Miltenyi. You know, and some of the courses, such as those that I've had at London Biologics, have taught about customer engagement and presentation skills and things like this. But it's only really at Miltenyi that I've been able to put these kind of things into practice as well, routinely doing this in front of hundreds of people at events, and, you know, events such as this as well, which we're very happy to be able to present at. What is also nice is obviously not so much on the direct hands-on scientific side, but looking at, you know, guiding customers through cell and gene therapy processes, and we've seen a massive amount of growth of this and continue to do so since my start with the company in 2017. Also, this is like sort of moving on to the development and training of other employees within the team. So obviously the recruitment of training of these people, and now managing a team of 3 account managers who help individual people across the field, across the country, with their cell and gene therapy needs. So, you know, this is a very different thing for me. Most of my career was in scientific level, so, you know, doing bench work on the lab, and, you know, really moving into sales has been very different for me, and sort of learning a lot more sort of different things, but it's very much still involved within these particular fields. And really it's the companies that I've worked for have been able to do these kind of things and to be very effective at doing so. And finally, obviously, being involved with things such as the Advanced Therapies Network and the Advanced Therapies Treatment Centre networks across the country too. It's been really great to work with different levels of people, whether that be sort of people who are manufacturing, the people who are administering. It's lots of different things that you can learn. And really looking back at the career that I've had, it's very difficult to have ever imagined that I would have been in this position. But to look at those next people who may be following through to do these kind of things, it's really good to know that there are events such as this and other MSCs such as Francesco's, to look and sort of see what didn't exist and what now does. And obviously what we need to then do to continue to improve that as we move through, and as we see more and more of these therapies advance towards the patients. So with the next slide, that's my last slide, and I will pass very kindly over to Yvette Cleland from CPL Life Sciences. She is the CEO, and she will be presenting advanced therapies and the unmet skills needs associated with them. So over to you, Yvette.
Thank you, Matthew. If we could go on to the next slide. And just to continue setting the scene today and reflecting on something Uta said at the beginning, the UK currently accounts for 12% of the ATM trials globally. And new research done recently has found that the UK's clinical environment has encouraged commercial sponsorship from around the world. So funding in advanced therapy grew by 66% in 2019 versus 2018. And this trend is set to continue on the evidence of continued high levels of investment last year. So now with over 70 advanced therapy developers active and growing in the UK, we are now at a critical stage in our journey to build future skills in advanced therapies. Next slide, please. So there are so many areas with advanced therapy skill gaps that need to be addressed, but today I am focusing primarily on what could be part of the solution through the apprenticeship schemes and how they could start to drive some of the core areas requiring skilled workers, and perhaps why uptake has been so slow. So as an industry, I think we really do have a collective responsibility here. Next slide, please, Sarah. So we know the projections for future skilled workers in life sciences sees us requiring 133,000 additional workers by 2030, and 55,000 of those will be to replace retirees. Many of these employees will be working with advanced therapies. Next slide, please, Sarah. So the UK research sector leads Europe in phase 1 and 2 trials, and advanced therapies are fueling much of this growth. The clinical research apprenticeship scheme would be an invaluable asset with core skills that we need in the coming years. Yet the industry has responded with only 30 registrations, and 17 of these apprenticeships are actually clustered into one company. So the picture is similar with the regulatory affairs apprenticeships with 32 registrations and the ATMP course with 42. So there may be multiple issues behind the slow uptake. Firstly, a lack of awareness of the 3 most recent schemes designed by employers, so designed by you for employers. And these sit within clinical research, regulatory affairs and ATMP. Companies may have concerns around how apprentices can be supported within businesses, and yet there is support there available. Most companies seem to assume that other companies are doing lots of skill training and rely on that to provide future skills, but that is just simply not the case. There is a lack of understanding that you can take skilled and more mature workers in your current business and cross-skill train them via the apprenticeship schemes using your levy. So how do we start to drive this opportunity in a meaningful way? Well, the industry itself needs to be more accountable at board level and embed future skills as a core commitment in strategy. At the very least, building awareness of the current apprenticeships and how to utilise these. To simplify this, if the 70+ advanced therapy companies in the UK place just 1 apprenticeship on each of the 3 courses each year for the next 5 years, that alone would drive over 1,000 apprentices coming through. In utopia, if the whole industry took a similar approach, this would be 10 times this number and create a domino effect of talent maturing by 2030. So we're an evidence-based industry, so let's do some research here. Contact Kent and Hertfordshire universities who run these 3 apprenticeships and at least familiarise yourselves with the apprenticeship modules, the support that's available to you and the endpoint assessment. So many organisations are focused on diversity and inclusion, and the apprenticeship schemes are an exceptional vehicle to allow young people from perhaps a disadvantaged background who may be gifted within science to embark on a pathway for a lifelong career within life sciences. To close out today, I'd like to share with you something more anecdotally. I was recently speaking to an executive from a global biopharma firm who took me through the details of a multi-million investment in diversity and inclusion and corporate social responsibility with multiple initiatives in place. When I asked how many apprentices they had and what level of investment in newly skilled life sciences graduates had been taking place, the answer to that was minimal. So we all need to step up and be accountable, invest in skills as part of our diversity, inclusion and corporate social responsibility, as this alignment to the future skills gap would bring needed and diverse talent into industry that could be the proper definition of corporate social responsibility. Thank you for your time today, and I would like to now pass back to Francesca Gliubich.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Very interesting talks, and we have a lot of questions from the audience. But before asking the questions, as I promised everyone, I will read them out, the questions. I had one myself, so I go with selfishly, I will ask my question first. And Kate, you mentioned that we really have to work to create a healthy ecosystem whereby people move on but come back. Do you have suggestion, or does anyone has a suggestion on how can we do that? Because it's difficult in all fields, and the people going back and forth from academia to industry is not a straightforward move, but it will be even more essential in this field.
Very happy to start off that. Thoughts that I've got are around reciprocal arrangements. So rather than kind of losing people from one place or another, but actually to put in place reciprocal arrangements. So things like placements, I think apprenticeships are a great idea. And I noticed there is a question around that balance between academia and industry and how do we get that? And I think it's tricky. But I guess if we do it in maybe a slightly more collaborative approach where possible, we might end up with the best of both worlds for everybody, because we do have such a, a finite pool of resource, certainly at the moment. And very interested to hear what other people think.
Yes, I wanted to ask Francesco, because Francesco, you have an MSc, as you just spoke about it, and where people have opportunities to have internship with companies.
Yeah, that is clearly it is a great opportunity where they learn a huge amount of information, and also the contact with key leaders in biotech or even big pharma make really give that edge. I mean, I just seen in the chat Uta asking whether do UK initiative in training education compare to US EU, and actually we did that search, and I think that there isn't very much, apart from the, of course, the traditional, let's say stem cell focused or regenerative medicine, the sort of thing. There is very little, or if any, providing this, more generalized approach or more wholeness approach. I think that is where we may play, as at least academic players, we may play a critical role in helping industry to flourish. And
a question for you, Francesca, and then also for you, Francesco, and then I wanted to ask Yvette her views, is you said, Francesco, that internship are very, very helpful and students learn a lot. Are we able to do enough? Do we have enough to offer? And I would like to hear then also Yvette's views on this.
Yeah, great question, because I think we do not do enough at all. And I think this is, providing the, academic approach is very important in terms of providing the notions, but clearly there is an important need of translating the information into something really practical. So the experiences would be really a game changer.
Yvette, would you like to add something?
So my experience really has been through the apprenticeship schemes, and that is something I'm really trying to lobby within industry at the moment. What I have found very shocking is we have massive skill shortages within clinical research. That's driving up the cost of clinical trials. It makes them quite unstable because people are moving around all the time, and yet the industry itself has not adopted this. It keeps relying on other people to do it, and they're not. I think the awareness out there is too low, and it's very difficult to understand how to build that awareness. Even when you look at the ATMP program, which is exactly what we're here to talk about today, and that only has 42 apprentices on it at the moment. So I don't know what the answer is on how we engage better. I go off, it's part of my passion to try and let the industry know what is going on out there, and yet the engagement levels are low. That's why I've said a couple of times, there is a collective responsibility here. The courses that have been designed within clinical research were designed by employers from Trailblazers, because we were saying as an industry, we don't want the government to design these courses. We want to design them and make sure they're fit for purpose and fit for future skills. So lots of employers came together over a year. I was involved in those Trailblazers. So much work was done, and yet the industry hasn't adopted them. So it's very difficult to understand
this, because
I see the two. Sorry, go, and then Uta also has a question. Go, Francesco, you start.
Yeah, so to add, because that is really important. This is a completely untapped resource, because if you investigate the level of undergraduate or nearly graduated, they're not aware. I mean, young students or young graduates, they're not aware at all about this. And I think that we may have a great opportunity to, for example, for MedCity to intervene in career fairs, for example.
And I'll pass on to Uta, but I will comment, and this is also a comment from the audience. that links to what you said, Francesco, because students are not aware, and it would be great to find a way to make the information more shared, but also Gioia Corabini from Achilles was saying that from a company perspective also it could be useful to have resources where all the relevant MSCs, PhD programs and everything, because they also don't know when maybe they would like to offer more possibilities and they don't know where to offer. Uta, go because I've been kind of letting you wait for too long.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to add, I've been running this master's at Imperial in Advanced Therapeutics for 5 years, and I have really tried hard to find 6 months research project industry places within for my students for their research projects, and have been very unsuccessful. And the answer, and I have contacted many companies, I can tell you, the answer I usually get is that 6 months research projects for MSc students not long enough to be useful to the company. And I think we need maybe a bit of an attitude change here, and need companies to understand that these students shouldn't just be useful to them and producing data and research outputs, but the companies may have to be a little bit altruistic in helping us to train the students, and whatever anybody around this call can do to convince biotech, SMEs, and even large pharma to take on students for short research placements would be very helpful.
And talk about awareness. We talk about the students and the pharma. There is a question asking whether we should be doing something more to raise awareness at government level on the need for these skills. Yvette, I can see you nodding, so maybe you want to say something here. You're muted.
Sorry. I was just saying, where do we start? It's so difficult. There's such a network to get through. I think we need to go back a step. I think if more employers were stepping up and starting to drive the so I think at the moment that the government put a levy out that we could use in order to train as many people as possible in different things, and that's been very poorly adopted by employers. So it gives us not a great step up when we go back to government and say we want more help, we want more support on this, because we're not using what we've already got. And the other thing, I worked directly within the pharmaceutical industry many years ago, and when I joined that industry, there were 40 or 50 graduates joining at any one time and being trained and developed and staying with those businesses for about 7 years on average, and then moving on. We outsource everything now, and where we outsource to don't train. So we've got this real gap in the middle. That's a little bit of a lost world for everybody. So I've been working really hard over the last couple of years. So we had an initiative 4 years ago when I spent a year, I invested in developing a very comprehensive training program for life sciences graduates who were saying we cannot get into industry, we can't get our foot in the door. Every employer is asking for 2 to 3 years experience and I can't find my way in. So we developed a program. It took us a year to write the program, and we then actually leased a lot of that work to Kent University for the degree course for the apprenticeship. So we, in the end, fully funded and trained over 250 graduates from a life science background. And when we went to industry and said, we have trained and given these graduates a real life example of industry, how it all works, what's happening, we struggled to get clients to actually take them on board. So I think there's a psychology in industry we need to address, and that is you are not going to keep getting 2 to 3 years experience all of the time. We need to bring a high volume of workers into industry, new blood, if you like, and upskill them and keep doing that. But it has to start with the employer engaging with the programs that are available.
And there are questions actually referring to this, and I will read it out, it's from Callum Watson. What would you define as being the single most important action? So you may have kind of answered to this already, for rapidly growing CNG therapy companies to ensure they have the right skills in place for the future. And what do you expect as being the biggest challenge? So maybe, Yvette, you have spoken already to the biggest challenge. If you want to continue to this, and then I see Francesco is moving, so maybe Francesco, you want to say something as well, or were you?
The only thing I would say is really what I said before. If we've got over 70 advanced therapy companies in the UK at the moment, and that is growing. If each of those took on 2 or 3 apprentices, we've already started. That would, and they keep doing that year on year for the next 5 or 6 years. We then start to get thousands of apprenticeships through. Apprentices through and start developing that. And I find that the industry has a domino effect. The more people that do it, the more others that will do it, and that will just start to grow.
And I think, Francesco, did you want to say something, or did I misunderstand?
No, I mean, I'm moving because I'm sitting there all day, as you know.
I can understand.
No, I just can add, I think it is, well, what Yvette is highlighting is, of course, is summarizing beautifully the need. I also think it is important for the industry to deliver, because, you know, this is somehow a gray area to a certain extent. There are a huge disproportionate number of initiatives, probably disproportionate to the, facts that may, prompt a real market into it. So I think it is important that among these skills, there is a need for an education for clinical trial, actually. And I think it is where we are a bit short. I don't know whether Yvette, you agree with that, but it's a huge risk where many of these companies fail.
Yeah. I apologize, I got kicked out of line, so I missed something, or please respond.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I was just going to say that, again, we've got the new clinical research apprenticeship, and there are only 30 apprentices on there. So, it would be a brilliant start to actually really start giving Kent University some support and getting more either graduates onto that, or young people that are gifted in science that can't afford to go to university, and we would get a lovely diversity of people moving through.
There is a question on what is the typical amount that companies should contribute towards employees training, like working towards qualification as masters. I don't know who wished to answer, if anyone.
Can I just start? Maybe I would like to involve Uta in this, because, I think we haven't got yet so despite the need, we don't have a structured educational initiative. Interacting with Catapult could be a good possibility, because, this pathway of, let's call it, advanced therapists, is not yet defined. If you are a doctor, you know what course to do. This is a very holistic approach to a certain extent. And I think we're not probably yet ready to equip the student for really a full, maybe actually a degree in this. I don't know whether, Uta, what do you think? But
yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think the other thing we haven't really addressed yet is what is the student profile in the student body? What does the student body look like? And certainly at Imperial College, within the advanced therapeutic space, 2/3 or more of the students that we have on the courses are non-EU, non-home students. They are all from Asia, Korea, Singapore. So, I'm sometimes wondering, are we training the right students for the UK, and why are UK students not joining. And I think on top of that, we now have a big problem with EU students not coming anymore to the UK because the fees are too high. So, you know, I'm sometimes wondering where are our UK students getting their training, and maybe people who run the apprenticeship schemes could comment. I'm assuming that students on those courses are mainly home students, are they? But certainly in the master's programs, they're not.
You know, Uta, we're having exactly the same. I think 50% of our students come from different parts of Asia. But, you know very well that stem cell tourism, if you call it like that, is actually there. So there is let's call it sensitivity. They're really primed about this. So whatever there is a master that can give them an edge, it's a big sell.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know this may be a really kind of silly question, but do we know, is there anything we can do to attract UK students? Because I mean, diversity is what we want, what we need, and but we want to make sure that we train also for the UK workforce. So we want an exchange of workforce, but we want to be able to retain some. Otherwise, the business will go out of the UK, which is what overall we want to avoid. We want to retain leadership.
My personal views on that are, and we have tried to do this, is to get into schools. If we get into schools where there are science academies, we asked 100 CRAs, clinical research associates, how they came into industry, and 95% of them said by virtue of an accident. They found out about clinical research accidentally. It wasn't platformed at that universities, it wasn't spoken about in their schools, it wasn't a career pathway they knew existed. And I think you can broaden that out a little bit more to regulatory affairs and other areas of the industry. So unless we have capture management at a younger age, where we know there are science academies, where people are actively going in and they're speaking about the wonderful career pathways that are available, we will then start to bring more UK youngsters into that space that will probably and possibly stay within the UK and work. So that may be one way. It's just starting a little bit earlier. Yeah,
I'd absolutely agree with that, Yvette, as well. I mean, the sort of people that we find that sometimes that we talk to, be invited to speak to, is obviously with the Advanced Therapies Treatment Centre, and it's often people sort of looking to perhaps retrain. But sort of thinking back to relate it to obviously what I was aware when I was like sort of coming through my career, I think that the further down the better. It's like, I mean, I had no idea really what I wanted to do when it sort of came to A-levels. It was just a series of like fortunate accidents, I suspect. It's like, you know, thinking about how, you know, what do I ultimately want from my career? And you want something which is going to be rewarding. It's obviously going to pay you well because, you know, you want to have money to enjoy it. But yeah, I would say that some sort of engagement with schools, which is not really what I've seen too much of to this stage, to really sort of outline a pathway for somebody, because I kind of went in blind. I don't really think I really knew what I wanted to do. And I suppose you don't necessarily at that age, but at least if you have options and things that are aware to you, then maybe that makes things a little bit sort of clearer. And there's so many places and cities and universities and all these locations up and down the country where it's just good to give people that opportunity to sort of think what they could become. Obviously, the ultimate rest is up to them with qualification-wise, but at least they know that these kind of things could exist as well.
And there is a suggestion in the chat from Sean, whether we could capitalize on the new understanding of public, of the power of research, you know, through what we experienced with COVID, and maybe to target schools after when everything reopen, of course, to promote advanced therapies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can see that Francesca already said yes.
Well, yeah,
Francesca.
I mean, also the post-COVID crisis we all expect, and you know, of course, all the youngsters are facing, you know, potentially terrible future, providing a new career, career opportunity, I think this is perfect. It's just a matter of conveying the message.
And Uta, I think you have a raised hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this. So the British Society for Gene and Cell Therapy has a very active outreach program, and we're going into a lot of schools, raising awareness of advanced therapeutics through little kits that we have, you know, and interactive activities. But I think the point is well made. What we don't do or haven't done yet is to raise awareness of career opportunities, you know, in the sort of GCSE A-level cohorts. And I think that's certainly something I will take on board as president of the British Society for Gene and Cell Therapy, and, you know, think about more carefully if we can tack raising awareness of career opportunities onto activities that we're already doing. Thank you for this suggestion.
And Francesco, as there is a question that came up that is a bit specific, but I'll read it. Why the MSc and summer school, now that you will be holding digitally anyway, whether the modules, the single modules, will be made available separately?
Yeah, so we are working on the single modules to be available. You know, typically with university, everything is very, very slow, but we work on that. It's more likely the summer school will be made available through the education hub we have. We're gonna probably through Advanced Therapy Network. We may actually convey the information so that everybody can log in.
There is another question asking whether anyone has an opinion on what would be the right balance between academia and industry training for the future, you know, advanced therapies skills workforce. Let's see, does anyone want to kick off? Otherwise, I'll call out as if we were at school. Uta, I will ask you to have a first stab of that. You're muted, sorry.
Sorry, I can't even unmute myself. Can you just briefly repeat the question? I'm sorry about having to.
Of course. The question was about whether anyone have an idea of what would be the right balance between academia and industry in developing the future AT skills and the progression of the new therapies.
Well, I think it certainly needs to be a joint effort. You know, I don't think you can assign X% to academia and X% to industry. I think what's really important is to understand that historically academia has provided the pipeline for innovation that went into industry, and that, you know, a lot of companies that we have now which are active in the space have originated from spin-out companies, and you know, I think hence education and attracting talent into academia is really important, and academia needs to provide the traditional routes of training. I think where industry comes in is to have the more maybe novel and innovative training opportunities. And, you know, we heard earlier, you know, this requirement about having 2 or 3 years experience. You run out of people that have 2 or 3 years experience. So industry needs to, I think, be prepared to take a risk, but maybe also give people that don't have a traditional career path and that don't have a PhD an opportunity to rise through the ranks, you know, just purely based on experience and the quality of work that's produced. There seems to be still this, you know, magic glass ceiling with that without a PhD you won't break through, and I think that's certainly wrong. I don't know if that you're nodding, if you have anything some more qualified to say than I do on this topic.
Matthew, what do you think? Oh, sorry.
No, I actually probably don't. I was going to use an anecdotal situation, but I'll maybe do that a little bit later that might feed into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I could sort of say it from my side, as I guess it's proof that, you know, I'm only educated to bachelor's level. I never really wanted to go down further education. I was done after university. I just wanted to make money. But, you know, it is proof that you can go down that route, and, you know, that, you know, it's really important to sort of highlight the fact that like Uta said, like, you know, university academia is incredibly important with this, because if you watch the trends at the moment, it's all been grown and nurtured in universities and then taken to that next level in industry. And this has happened with so many of these companies that we've seen. And I think it really involves a relationship between the two of them. And obviously, at the moment, academia would, you know, be traditionally where a lot of your doctors and masters sort of students will gravitate towards, and highly educated people, you know, very, very smart. And then obviously it's equally them coming out of academia at some stage and going into industry, and vice versa with those kind of opportunities. I think that it would be good for it to work both ways at the moment. I mean, I know that previously, a long time ago, I've like sort of, you know, maybe aimed to perhaps go into academia, and it's been a little bit difficult for me because of the lack of qualifications that I have as well. But, you know, it's just sort of thinking of that relationship between the two, because academia is vitally important, and then obviously industry is sort of, you know, developing those ideas to the next level as well.
Uta, I see you have
I just wanted to raise one other point that's sort of related, and in a way it's the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is that the salaries in academia are generally lower than in industry. So in my experience over the last few years, it's becoming more and more difficult to attract talented postdocs into universities. When we have jobs, we have to advertise them sometimes several times to get the talent that we want. And that's a drainage, I think, of talented people into industry, in part, I think, motivated by the higher salaries. And, you know, unless that gets addressed at one point, and particularly, I think in London, you know, as a postdoc and lecturer, you can barely live on the salary that the university pays you. I think it's going to be a continuous problem.
Francesco, and then Kate.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that is a big problem. That is probably why there is maybe an ambivalence, you know, to provide a fully skilled, you know, personnel to industry. But at the same time, I think we, as university, we may find an opportunity that by interacting with the industry, and particularly in industry, the industry player can actually come to teach at our, you know, courses. But also, don't forget, it's a good, potentially is a good source of money for the university. That could be in the end cascaded to in a different way to salaries and to recruitment, because that is another big problem. But I agree with you. Unfortunately, there is this, and tacitly, if you like, there is this antagonism. You don't want actually to work for somebody else that would exploit it. But yeah.
Kate, you were.
So just to sort of reiterate that, really, we definitely experience salary. It's probably the single biggest factor that people cite when they leave the university and move to industry, and that is something that we've got to tackle, really, one way or another. But what we've also seen is that it's slowly starting to come back the other way as well. So we are getting people that go out to industry maybe 2 or 3 years, but will then eventually come back, because there are other, it comes back to that motivation point, I think, that there are other motivations for working for an academic organisation, and we do see people come back the other way, which is why I think if we could somehow maybe formalise some of this movement between academia and industry and somehow manage the salary kind of issue, then I think it would end up to the benefit of everybody, really. But I don't know quite how we'd go about that or how feasible it is, really.
Uta.
Yeah, so salary is one aspect, but I think job security is the second aspect, you know, for people who want to develop an academic career, to make the jump from being a postdoc into finding a lecturer position is getting close to impossible, I would say.
I don't see other question. I will ask Sarah whether she can, I missed out any question on the chat. And if that's not the case, and I think we are close to the time where we were supposed to finish anyway, I will ask out whether anyone has any further question. Well, meanwhile, I kind of have one, because the salary problem, let's call it, is it not linked also to the fact that there is not enough talent? Because in other field of research, this problem is less, is less strong, because there are enough, let's say, skilled work. There is enough skilled workforce for everyone, so there is not a kind of a war of salaries to to win the most the talent. So is that not the way to solve a little bit, or am I completely wrong? What do you think, Yvette? I see your raised hand.
So one of the things that I've looked at extensively over the last 7 or 8 years is, because we outsource everything, if we're not training up the right numbers of people coming through, that means then it's a valuable commodity. Skills become a valuable commodity, and that commodity starts to increase. And we're now seeing contract research organizations will pay sign-on fees to candidates. They move around far more quickly, and all of the time demanding a higher salary. Now, if there was more talent coming in and there wasn't a scarcity, because it's scarcity that's creating that, it would start to level the playing field out, because all of a sudden you've got a far more robust workforce. There are far more of those. I'm not an advocate of everybody earning less money, but I think salaries have gone to such a degree that it's getting ridiculous now. There are certain skills now where you can go out and command, regardless of what the market rate is, you can command what you like. And that's where we've got that difficulty. And where I've seen that particularly is in the US, where now some of the salaries out there have, I don't know how companies are running businesses out there now. It's so expensive. And if you think salaries and is normally around 70% of the cost of running a business, that scarcity, the increasing value, then the trials go up, and it's a never ending situation. So Francesca, you are spot on. The more people having coming into the industry, they're getting trained up appropriately, we start to balance out that problem.
And that, I think, was one of the aspects when we were talking about creating a healthy ecosystem. We don't want to flood the market. We want to, as an academia, we are happy when we train people and they find a job and they're paid well. This should be our aim. And so we don't want to train people that then don't find the job because there is too many. But it's difficult to find the right balance. I don't know if anyone has an opinion on this one.
Now, I have to say, for example, with our master last year, which means the COVID summer, out of, I think, 17 students, 10 had a job straight away. So clearly there is a demand, and it's very rewarding, I have to say this. I still share the concerns with Jutta, but it is rewarding to see that. And clearly there is a market.
Yes, and there is a comment saying that outsourcing is a big factor in large pharma and in small, and because it's easy to wind down areas, but it's difficult to then ramp up in key areas like advanced therapies. Okay, I don't see any further question. So I wanted to first ask to all the speakers if there is any any kind of issue that of this broader field that we haven't discussed yet? Have we forgotten anything that we should be thinking about? And I don't know if you want to go, shall I call out or just nod if you think of anything? Uta.
I think one group of professionals that we haven't talked about, and I can't talk knowledgeably about, are QPs. So qualified persons are used to release GMP manufactured ATMPs. And I know there's a massive shortage of these, but I also don't know whose responsibility it is to train this group of people up. And if there are initiatives, are we as a community talking to the right people who design QP courses?
And I think I can't answer either. So does anyone know the answer to this question that we just posed?
Thing is that the courses are very expensive. So a postgraduate can't afford it. Well, it's not an MBA, but it's still is quite expensive. I don't know whether that is sufficient. Yvette, sorry.
I was going to say as well, I think as well, if you look back many years ago to where we got our QPs from, it's quite different from where we expect the academic background for our QPs to come from now. And I know about 4 years ago, we literally had about 30% of the industry retiring, and we weren't replacing them because we were asking for a different skill set coming in, and we weren't ahead of time in how we were developing those skills. So now we're back in that cycle again, and we've made trying to take those people through very expensive, as well as you say, Francesco. So it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy again, because we just weren't ahead of the game on it. We knew it was happening. We could see it was happening, but we didn't catch up quickly enough. So, yeah.
And another contribution says that industry sponsors MBA quite readily, and maybe there needs to be the same enthusiasm to sponsor scientific areas as ATs. Okay.
I do agree, but
go.
I was just going to say I do agree, but again, and I'm going to go back to the same subject. We can create lots of vehicles to push this forward, but if industry doesn't adopt them, it just makes it very difficult to replenish the numbers that we need. So it's that psychology behind 2 to 3 years experience and thinking that someone else is training all these people. There's a bit like the money tree that we thought was out there, that there was a skills tree that was dropping people from the sky, and that's just not the case. So.
Thank you. Well, with this, unless there are other questions, I'm calling out for questions because I want to make sure no one feels that they couldn't ask what they wanted. But if there is nothing else, I would like to thank all the speakers. This has been really, really interesting and a nice debate, exactly what we want to do. With these meetings, I really wanted for people to discuss and think, what is it we should be thinking about? Not necessarily coming away with answers, but even just with more questions that will feed into our everyday jobs and lives to try and address this. And I will then hand over back to Sarah, because I think she may close as our event managers. But from me, thank you very much for all speakers and our participants for joining this event. And I hope soon we'll be able to have a real life event with added network streaming, so everyone can participate even when they can't travel, but hope to see you all in real life.